It was the year when a couple of detectives made the best dressed list. Miss America showed too much talent, and the Russians weren't rushing to the Olympics. Here are the 10 most triumphant, dangerous, energetic, ominous, bold, tragic, melodious, exhausting, trendy stories of the year. Who can forget 1984?
They say you can't go back, but we forced the issue.
Friday night at 10 o'clock was Miami Vice.
Oh my goodness.
So sexy.
It was the hottest show.
Crockett and Tubbs were so cool.
I was in love with Sonny, right? What young woman was not at that time?
I don't even remember the plot of the show, but I do remember what they were wearing.
This was a time before cops needed all the guns. All they needed was a nice necklace, a good smile, a nice suit, and they'd crack the case.
They were really the original fashion police.
Armani suits with t-shirts underneath it. Remember this?
I don't know if you've ever run in boat shoes before, but how they ever caught one criminal in that kind of attire?
My uncles hated it because they were all New York cops. Detectives don't look like that, Mikey. They look like fish from Barney Miller.
I remember seeing people trying to dress like that and thinking, no, they didn't do it right.
Jersey guy walking around with a white jacket on, thinking I'm looking cool.
I can't tell you how many pictures I've got where I look ridiculous, where I've got my fancy jacket where the sleeves are jacked up like that.
It gave guys across the country, an excuse not to shave. You're going with that 5 o'clock Don Johnson shadow.
It's good to look at, but not so good to kiss.
The way it would come in, there'd be little blonde patches, then there'd be some black, some brown, some red. I looked ridiculous.
You ended up looking like Jacksonville Vice, where you weren't quite sexy enough to make the Miami squad, so they sent you down the road.
In 1980, because of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, Jimmy Carter called a boycott of the Olympics.
So then 4 years later, in a completely childish move, the Soviets say, okay, well, you didn't come to our birthday party. Well, we're not coming to your birthday party either.
Everyone behind the Iron Curtain stays home.
Good for you. Stay back home, and we'll just do a whole sweep of gold medals. Thank you very much.
It was a memorable Olympics despite the boycott.
It gave us an entire generation of Olympic stars, like Carl Lewis and Mary Lou Retton.
Everybody loved Mary Lou Retton.
What an adorable young woman she was.
She brought that 4'9" heat.
She was on everything. All sorts of products, all sorts of shows.
She was just this little spitfire that did all of these amazing gymnastic tricks.
She made all the crap that she did look easy because every time she'd land, that big smile, hey, look at that.
Everything was just this.
I think gymnasts should land and go, whoa, I pulled it off. Don't do that at home. Don't do that at home.
Without the stiff competition from the Soviet bloc, Americans came home with a lot of medals, which made almost everyone in the United States happy.
Feel like you're part of the Olympic action. Play McDonald's. When the U.S. wins, you win Olympic Games.
McDonald's had this big campaign. When the U.S. wins, you win.
Every time the U.S. won, you got something.
You could win a Big Mac, fries, or soda, depending if the U.S. won gold, silver, or bronze.
Without the Soviets in Los Angeles to compete that summer, we win everything.
We won all the medals.
McDonald's ends up taking a bath.
There's probably some ad executive somewhere who lost his job because he's the one who promoted that idea.
We won gold again. I want you to go in there and kick Miller right in the head tomorrow. Yeah, do a scratch-off game. I can't stand that son of a...
Vanessa Williams was 20 years old when she won Miss America in 1984.
She was absolutely spectacularly beautiful. She had this tremendous singing voice.
Huge smile, these sparkling blue eyes.
The first ever African-American Miss America.
Should be. Great story. End of story. Doesn't quite work out that way.
What felt like minutes, these photos surface.
It was interesting because Hugh Hefner would not publish the nude photos.
Penthouse, unfortunately, had no such qualms.
Leave it to the Italian guy, Guccione. He's gonna do it. Ugh.
Turns out that Vanessa Williams posed in the nude twice.
I became Miss Minnesota June of 1984. Not very long after that, the pictures in Penthouse hit the newsstands.
This issue exploded. It was Penthouse's biggest issue. It produced over $14 million in profits.
Of course, everybody in the pageant had to buy one.
And I would imagine a lot of people went out of their way to see them. I, of course, didn't look. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
I remember thinking Vanessa Williams was a hero that needs to be celebrated.
Nude pictures of somebody today would be about as scandalous as a parking ticket. You'd get in more trouble for misgendering a cat.
Back then, it was like the scandal. Oh my gosh, Miss America posed nude.
Miss America, as an organization, has a reputation to uphold, so they demanded that Vanessa Williams resign as Miss America within 72 hours.
I must relinquish my title as Miss America.
When she has to step down from Miss America, you know, you'd assume it's the end of her career.
She was going to be successful no matter what.
Vanessa Williams went on to have a phenomenal career. She is an actress, she's a recording artist.
She was like the hero of the whole thing. Like, I think it made her so cool.
And 32 years later, what is Vanessa Williams doing? She's judging the Miss America contest. She got the last laugh.
Redemption, admiration, and second chances. And that is what our country is all about.
It's time for a Who Can Forget pop quiz. Which of these 1984 hit films almost featured John Candy? A. Beverly Hills Cop, B. Ghostbusters, or C. The Karate Kid? The answer is B. Ghostbusters. Candy was offered a role, but turned it down.
They should have had John Candy as a Ghostbuster. He would have just eaten the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man like a hero.
Watch. Terrific! But suppose it's over 3 hours. Relax. Panasonic VHS tapes up to 4 hours.
VCRs were at one time just for the elite.
It was something that we had all heard about, but it was so expensive.
By 1984, the price had dropped enough to make them accessible to everyday middle America.
There were two systems. You had Betamax and you had VHS.
VHS was what all your friends had, and the one rich kid in town had a Betamax.
This was a monumental moment for Americans because now they could record their favorite shows right off the television.
The VHS was the very beginning of on-demand culture.
The idea of putting the power of television in the hands of an individual seemed like a total fantasy.
The combination of the VCR and like HBO was just next level entertainment.
The Popular House was always the one that had the biggest video cabinet where you'd open it up and it would just be these rows and rows of movies and TV shows.
That's what upset most of these Hollywood studios, whether they were television studios or movie studios.
The only person who's making money is the person who's selling the blank tapes and the person who's making the VCR machine.
As usual, the big studios would rather fight progress than embrace it.
Universal City Studios, they sued Betamax, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court.
It was a very close decision by the Supreme Court, 4-5 decision, but the Supreme Court voted, I would say, in favor not only of Sony and Betamax, but in favor of the American people.
It meant that Betamax and VCR manufacturers and makers were not contributing to copyright infringement, so they were off the hook.
Ultimately, neither technology survived, but they were dramatically influential in changing the way Americans consume entertainment.
Nowadays, it seems quaint because you can stream almost anything with the push of a button. But if you're one of those guys who recorded every show and have a huge library in your basement, you can probably sell it on eBay for like $11.
It was May 8th, 1984. The Milwaukee Brewers are facing off against the Chicago White Sox.
Started out as a pitcher's duel.
Don Sutton, who had the greatest hair you'll ever see. He throws 5 scoreless innings. It looks like it's going to be a low-scoring game.
But in the bottom of the 6th, the White Sox scored a run.
The Brewers answer back at the top of the 7th. Now it's 1-1.
Then at the top of the 9th,
the Brewers scored 2 more runs,
and everyone thought the game was over.
A lot of people start zipping up their jackets, thinking about beating the traffic.
Milwaukee has their great closer on the mound, Rollie Fingers, with that weird-ass mustache.
Rollie Fingers promptly blows the lead.
The White Sox rallied and scored 2 runs in the bottom of the 9th.
It's tied.
There are no ties in baseball.
You play until somebody wins.
These teams proceed to play 8 more innings. Nobody scores.
They actually had to stop the game and pick it up the next day.
You can't have 2-day games. That's just ridiculous.
The next morning comes, everybody has their coffee and biscuits, and we're off and running.
Again, no scoring.
Finally, in the 21st inning.
21st inning.
The Brewers score 3 runs, and you think, all right, that's it. It's over. We can go home.
And then they blew it again.
The White Sox come back to score 3 of their own, led by Carlton Fisk.
Somebody just throw this game now.
Both teams end up going through 14 pitchers combined.
Get that dude in here from center field. You're up.
The ball boy probably threw a couple of pitches at some point.
Finally, in the bottom of the 25th inning, which not enough sportscasters get to say.
It's the bottom of the 25th. We've been here for 17 days. The popcorn machine's broken.
Harold Baines hits a home run against Chuck Porter. And no, I don't remember that. I had to look it up.
End of game, walk-off home run, White Sox win.
25 innings, 8 hours, 6 minutes, and a full day after this game had started. And if you stuck it out to the end, you either A, have a gambling problem, B, a drinking problem, or might have been in a hostage situation.
And every guy who brought their wife is now divorced.
Marvin Gaye was like in a class by himself.
Love. How can you not love Marvin Gaye?
He was wonderful. He was smooth.
There was something about his songs and his voice that resonated through generations and genres.
I love Marvin Gaye's music in the 60s. Ain't That Peculiar, Ain't No Mountain High Enough.
What's going on? I heard it through the grapevine. Let's get it on. These are all iconic songs.
As a former New York City cab driver, I have probably seen more people go at it to his music than anybody's.
Listening to him on the radio or hearing him perform on a record, you would have never guessed at what was going on in his life.
There was a lot of pressure and a lot of fame, and he did a lot of drugs.
Here's Marvin Gaye living with his dad. Both of them, as I recall, were substance abusers and had a very tense relationship, father-son.
He and his dad had agreed to limit their exposure to each other for the good of everybody because they had such a volatile interaction.
It's just, between love and hate is but a step.
April 1st, 1984, Marvin Gaye Sr. ended the life of Marvin Gaye Jr.
A classic father-son argument turns into shoving and pushing, and that powder keg that they were living on top of finally exploded.
Marvin Gaye's dad shot him with a gun that Marvin had given him for Christmas.
Marvin Gaye Sr. got 5 years probation today in the shooting death of his son, the singer.
This oracle of urban life is gone, but he's taken not by the mean streets of the neighborhood. He was killed by his own dad.
I mean, that's something out of a Greek tragedy.
The utter shock of that sent ripples through Motown, through all of the music industry, through society.
10,000 mourners showed up for the funeral. Many famous musicians were there. Stevie Wonder sang at the funeral.
Life cut too short, had more to deliver.
It was so mediocre an ending to this champion, to this crusader, to this poet whose music lives on.
1984, big for ad campaigns.
One of the biggest ads of the 1980s was the famous Macintosh ad that aired during the Super Bowl.
To this day, people still talk about it.
This Apple ad was like nothing we had ever seen before. It was like watching a movie.
It was a takeoff of George Orwell's 1984.
A totalitarian-looking world, people marching like drones.
This giant screen with this sinister Big Brother talking head.
A woman who comes running into the factory with this hammer.
We shall prevail.
On January 24th, Apple Computer will introduce Macintosh. And you'll see why 1984 won't be like 1984.
It scared the ever-living hell out of me.
Really not the vibe you're going for when someone's passing the chips and guacamole.
We were excited about that? Okay. Back to football.
Apple was able to slay Big Brother and bring a future that we know today, where their screens are in every home, every pocket, and they make everything in China for pennies on the dollar.
It certainly is a big bun. It's a very big bun.
Where's the beef?
Where's the beef?
Where's the beef?
In the early 1980s, there was a burger war going on.
McDonald's and Burger King, McDonald's and Burger King, that was the big war. And then Wendy's comes in.
Where's the beef?
Some hamburger places give you a lot less beef on a lot of bun.
That cute old lady.
Hey, where's the beef?
It was just funny.
I don't think there's anybody back there.
This phrase seeped into the zeitgeist like no other. You had news anchors saying it, friends saying it, actors saying it, politicians saying it.
Where's the beef? Yeah.
Clara Peller became one of the most famous cultural icons in America.
She was on TV, she was in movies.
She was on all the talk shows. She was in WrestleMania.
Clara Peller was a big star. And you know why? In the 1980s, America loved old people.
You had the old president and Ronald Reagan.
The Golden Girls.
Bartles and James.
These are two old men selling wine coolers, a beverage that no old person ever drank.
If you were over 70, you seemed to rule the airwaves in 1984.
Thank you for your support.
To appreciate Bernard Goetz, you have to appreciate what New York was like in the 1980s.
You had a lot of seedy characters on the street and a lot of people that went far beyond just panhandling.
If you want to get stabbed, go to New York. If you want to get double stabbed, get on the subway in New York.
In 1984, the New York City subway was where SEAL Team 6 went to get scared.
In the midst of this tension between anarchy and emerging civilization, Bernie Goetz happened.
Bernie Goetz was a 37-year-old man on the subway in New York when he was approached by 4 African-American youths. One asked him how he was doing. He said, fine. And then, according to Bernie Goetz, they asked for $5.
He pulls out a gun and empties it on them.
The so-called vigilante who shot 4 young men on Saturday has still not been caught.
This dominated news headlines back in '84.
It was a national story.
A lot of people thought that he was justified in defending himself, and a lot of people, particularly the black leaders in the black community, thought that this was a racially motivated incident.
I have to say I was kind of on Goetz's side. I mean, the fear that he would have felt.
It was not race. It's fear, violence. It had nothing to do with race, but that didn't stop people from yelling.
Well, some called him a vigilante, others a crazy man. A few claimed that he was a hero. Tonight, police say that they have their suspect.
He was kind of a hero. He was the subway vigilante.
The guy who gets the sand kicked in his face, striking back.
You wanted a vigilante like Charles Bronson. I was so disappointed. This is the best New York could do.
You expect a hero to be this big, strapping Clark Kent-looking thing. Bernie Goetz looked like the guy who sold Clark Kent his life insurance.
The DA asked the grand jury to indict Goetz on 4 counts of attempted murder, 4 counts of assault, 4 counts of reckless endangerment.
Bernie Goetz only gets found guilty of 1 charge. He's carrying an unlicensed firearm. And he serves, I believe, 8 months of a 1-year sentence, and that is that.
If Bernie Goetz hadn't had the gun and they beat him up, would anybody have cared? Another, white guy on a subway getting beat up by some black kids.
Like so many things that have happened through the years in New York, this is one of those things where the debate continues on. Was justice served or not?
It's time for another Who Can Forget pop quiz. What 1984 innovation was made possible by rule changes at the FCC? Is it A, the CD-ROM, B, DNA fingerprinting, or C, infomercials? The answer is C, infomercials. In 1984, the FCC removed regulations on the length of TV advertising, spawning a new type of programming and a lot of late-night shopping.
You were trying to buy salvation. You were never buying the product. You were buying the sense of completion that these products offered you. I can't hold a job. All of my relationships are failing. Maybe the problem is I don't julienne carrots fast enough.
"1984 was huge for pop music.
Born in the USA, huge album, 30 million copies sold worldwide.
It was energized. It was Jersey. It was like the working man's rock and roll.
Born in the USA, one of the greatest songs of all time. Protest song, as a matter of fact.
We heard Born in the USA as like this patriotic thing. I don't think we understood it in real time.
It was a story about a Vietnam veteran who was having a really hard time reassimilating into society and a hard time finding work.
Bruce Springsteen is so complex, he was both on fire and dancing in the dark. I highly recommend turning on some lights next time.
Every girl wanted to be Courtney Cox. Do, 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 do.
It's the dad move every dad has at a wedding.
I always wondered if Bruce kind of rehearsed those moves in front of a mirror. Let me see, man. That was good. I like that. Yeah. Good. That'll work. Okay, let's go on stage.
She's excellent. I think she's awesome, man.
Oh my goodness, Madonna.
Like a virgin.
Hey! Remember the video? Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
She was plastered all over MTV.
As a little kid in 1984, I'm 8 years old. I'm looking at Madonna and I don't understand what I'm experiencing, but I do know I want to keep on experiencing it.
She loved that she was always pushing it too far.
As a parent of a young kid, Daddy, what's a virgin? I had to go how to deal with that.
Girls started to dress like Madonna. Guys started to dress like Madonna.
There was fishnet everywhere. There was black lace.
Fingerless gloves.
The eyeliner, and then she had the little mole.
Madonna very much looked like someone charged through a thrift store and just came out wearing whatever stuck to her along the way.
Madonna just transcends any standard.
She really helped craft that mindset for young women of, I don't have to fit in a little box. I don't have to do that. I can be who I want to be. And that's good news.
I loved Prince.
Prince was the reincarnation of Jimi Hendrix.
The sexiest 3'2" guitarist who ever lived.
He releases an album and a movie at the same time, and both are such huge successes.
#1 album for 24 consecutive weeks in the United States.
When Doves Cry, Let's Go Crazy.
I would die for you.
I went and saw Purple Rain in the theater probably 10 times.
That motorcycle and the girls and the music. Mwah.
I actually went to grade school with Prince, and if I had known then that he was going to be this world-famous rock star, I probably would have been a lot nicer to him.
Everyone was doing quite well there after Reagan's first term.
We were having tremendous success, both with the economy and with our dealings with foreign governments, in particular the Soviet Union.
Let's put those American flags back up. Let's get that space program fired up. Let's end communism. And guess what? I'm just getting started.
Reagan was once in a lifetime, once in a generation, certainly.
It was a very hard sell to suggest that you could do a better job than Ronald Reagan was already doing.
We came together in a national crusade to make America great again.
Listen, Reagan's just gonna lay waste to whoever we throw up there. Who's dumb enough to go? I'll do it. Thank you, Walter.
What I remember about Mondale, Walter Mondale, is virtually nothing.
If you're the second in command of a lackluster president who lost pretty handily 4 years prior, running as president maybe not necessarily the right thing to do.
I am proud to run with a man who will be one of the great presidents of this century, Walter F. Mondale.
Geraldine Ferraro should have been historic, right? Because she was the first woman to be chosen on a major presidential ticket.
When someone says Geraldine Ferraro, you go, oh yeah.
I was very impressed with her. You know, she had the knowledge, she had the background, she had the intelligence.
She was the better part of that ticket, that's for dang sure.
It's morning again in America.
What most people remember about 1984 and the presidential election was the famous Morning in America ad.
Under the leadership of President Reagan, our country is prouder and stronger and better.
The very first time I saw that commercial, I welled up. It was like a Coke commercial.
The voiceover in the commercial, it had the same feel as Ronald Reagan. It was laid back, it was confident.
Reagan understood the value of marketing.
It wasn't one of those nasty, got you, kind of ads where my opponent did this and none of that. It was really heartwarming.
The greatest moment came in the Mondale-Reagan debate, when Reagan again demonstrated his brilliance of being the great communicator.
Reagan got asked about the age difference between the two candidates, and he runs this beautiful bait and switch joke.
I will not make age an issue of this campaign. I am not going to exploit, for political purposes, my opponent's youth and inexperience.
That was like a knockout punch, and it was delivered with a velvet glove.
Mondale has an involuntary spasm of laughter that ends with him going, oh, I lost to this guy.
You could have called the entire election at that point.
Good evening. It is a very good evening for Ronald Wilson Reagan and the Republican Party.
The Reagan landslide was something that, you don't see nowadays.
It was like one state after another state after another state.
You had Reagan Democrats who came out and voted for Ronald Reagan.
Mondale only won his home state of Minnesota. Reagan took the other 49.
A lot of folks wonder how Reagan could win California, but it helps when you're an actor and know all of Hollywood's secrets.
It did feel like a new beginning for the whole country and America's place in the world, and Americans wanted to stick with it.
And the next day, it was officially Morning in America.